I remember the differences for sure. To me, West Coast thrash was more riffy and a little more plain, really, where the East Coast was a little more aggressive in a way. I guess because they, it was rooted in the punk, some of the guys and whatever, and they would kind of play. It was kind of hammering things out a little bit more, where the guys on the West Coast did play a little bit more with finesse. To me, at least at the time, I think that was the major differences. Like I said, the songs were more riffy, and on this side, it was a little more chordy.
What's the difference between West Coast metal drummers and East Coast metal drummers? It's the same thing for bands. I'm going to tell you, it's one word: attitude. Attitude. And it's not like, it's not, and I know someone's going to go, oh, you're going to tell me Slayer doesn't have attitude? They're a West Coast band. No, they do. But the East Coast has an attitude of, and to coin a term and to coin a song, that's it.
I don't know if there was rivalry, really. I mean, we loved those bands.
Yeah, it was camaraderie, more so. I mean, we would get their tapes through by trading, find mutual friends who knew them. People were always reaching out to see what the other ones were doing. I remember telling Gary Holt, I mean, the first time I met him, I said, it's kind of like being cousins that really never met each other, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's more what it was like.
I remember when Lee Altus he went to NYU with Heathen, and the original drummer from the band and myself went down there, and I had a case of Miller on my shoulder. I'd never met them before. I just said, hey, we're Overkill. We just wanted to say welcome to New York. And I mean, you're instantly friends if that's what you're doing. I always looked at it as kind of first a curiosity, a love of what they were doing, but then for sure camaraderie. But I always, to some degree, think that there's competition there, and I think it's healthy though, because, and I've told this to Holt too, say, I love you, but I still want to bury you every night you play in front of me.
I think that was the main difference at the beginning, and of course things kind of molded into the same kind of styles in a way as it went along. But I think originally there was a little bit more of the guys on the East Coast were more picking, and the guys on the West Coast were more pulling off as far as guitar terms,
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. See, I can't say that from a drummer standpoint of view, because if you're gonna say, Anthrax, Slayer, Overkill, Exodus, it's just as hard drumming in either band, and any of those bands, and I could say it from a standpoint from, I know all this music. Slayer's my favorite heavy metal band. I played all that stuff from 1986, to Jesus Christ. I always still play Slayer songs. Last week, my point being is that from a drum standpoint of view, there's no breaks, there's no non-attitude, there's attitude across the board in all those bands. But yeah, picky and chuggy, I definitely would agree with that. But as far as the drumming goes, nah, it's just equally as hard and equally as challenging and as good, no matter what coast it is.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. You could always tell a West Coast band from an East Coast band is just because it had this different sound, and I think that it's definitely like lifestyle-ish, is because, East Coast, living out here, it's like very fast-paced. It's, and on the West Coast, it's very like, hey man, everything is really groovy, man. It's like very laid back, so I think that kind of transitions into whatever it is. I think East Coast to me is a little bit more aggressive, and like what Dave said, is West Coast is a little bit more riffy and a little bit more chaotic. But I definitely could tell, like you can definitely see the difference between bands like Exodus and Anthrax and Us and Megadeth. It's like the same, yeah, there's a certain overtone to it all. So
it was a healthy competition, because you'd hear one of their records or you'd hear a new song or whatever, and you'd be inspired, to say, oh my God, listen to that, that's so fucking cool. Maybe give you an idea for something. There was probably, I would imagine, some of the back and forth going on with them as well. But it was different though. West Coast is different than the East Coast stuff.
But the beauty of it was that it was being created as this competition was happening, or this healthy competition. It wasn't something that had roots. It was brand fucking new. That was kind of the beauty of it. It wasn't you couldn't even steal something from somebody else, because it was still being created simultaneously around. It was being created in Germany at the same time. It was in the UK and South America. I mean, it wasn't that. I think, as time has gone by, obviously it's become a formula, but back then it was just, this sounds good, and it was all the same. It was the same recipe that made it sound good. The new wave of British heavy metal traditional heavy metal and a punk element. So that was the cool camaraderie, is that we all kind of knew where the other one came from by just looking them in the eyes. You didn't have to. They didn't have to say anything. You just knew.
Well, even when you went to a club, right? I mean, it's the way you dressed. You could see everybody had long hair. Everybody had some kind of studs on. You had the vest with the patches on it, with your favorite band on the back, and we were all part of the same club. You even see that at festivals now. Festivals is probably the closest thing I see to remembering that old vibe. When you see the guys that are out there, because there's guys out there, there's girls out there, there's old timers, there's young guys, and they all kind of have the uniform on,
Love the uniform.
and we're all part of the same club, and it was kind of like that.